We thought it'd be a good opportunity to crack open the archive and explore the relationship between the royal family and Canada. And joining us to look back is Dr. Carolyn Harris. She's a royal historian at the University of Toronto, the author of Magna Carta and its Gifts to Canada, and a recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal. Impressive indeed. Dr. Carolyn Harris, hello to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, let's just talk about this. Canada, founded in 1867. What has been the role of the British monarch in Canada?
Well, at the time in 1867, it was indeed the British monarch, as Canada achieved self-government at that time, but Britain was still in charge of Canada's foreign policy. There were some very high-profile royal visits in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Queen Victoria declined an invitation from Prime Minister John A. Macdonald to open Canada's first parliament on July the 1st, 1867. But all four of her sons and her daughter, Princess Louise, visited at various times. And what's fascinating is that there was already a distinctive way in which royalty were expected to present themselves in Canada. The press in 1878, when Princess Louise arrived, noted that Canadians were loyal to the crown, but they were also a democratic people and would object if there was court dress and backing out of rooms. And Princess Louise made herself very popular by saying, "I wouldn't care if they came in blanket coats." And we also see royalty who visited throwing themselves into local pastimes. We're going to see King Charles III participating in some street hockey, but Princess Louise and her husband, Lord Lorne, the Governor General, from 1878 to 1883, they went tobogganing and curling and skating. Queen Elizabeth II famously dropped the puck at a Vancouver Canucks hockey game in 2002. So it's interesting to see how 19th century royal tours, we already see there being a distinctive role for royalty in Canada, even before the establishment of a distinctive Canadian crown in the 1930s.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because Canadian, I suppose what we'd call independence, came about, started talking about it in 1926, came about in 1931. Was there ever any question then of dropping the British monarch and, having your own president or something?
There was never really a question of that. What Canada was seeking was more control over its own foreign policy, particularly in terms of relations with the United States, as at the time of the Alaska Panhandle dispute, early in the 20th century, for instance, that Britain was seen as being sympathetic to the United States' claims for Alaska to have a little more territory at the expense of the Yukon at the time of the Klondike Gold Rush. That was quite significant. So Canada was looking for more autonomy in its foreign policy, but wanted to maintain those ties with the emerging Commonwealth and with the Crown. So we have a very distinctive royal visit in 1939 when George VI and Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, toured Canada and then visited the United States. Because the Statute of Westminster had been passed by that time, so George VI was traveling as King of Canada, and he didn't open Parliament in 1939, but he gave royal assent to some legislation.
Let's listen to the last time the British monarch did open Parliament. That was Queen Elizabeth II, who travelled for the first time as monarch in 1957. Here she is.
As I now address you here for the first time, I will call to your minds the words of the earlier Elizabeth, when more than 3 centuries ago she spoke from her heart, speaker and members of her last Parliament, and said, "Though God hath raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves." Now here in the New World, I say to you that it is my wish that in the years before me I may so reign in Canada and be so remembered.
She was still then a relatively young monarch, I think about 5 years into the job. How important was it that she made that trip?
It was very important for her first visit to Canada as a reigning monarch to be the opening of Parliament. So she was undertaking her duties as a constitutional monarch. The Globe and Mail reports in 1957 that the mayor of Ottawa was expecting 100,000 people to converge on Ottawa for that opening of Parliament in 1957. And this was at a time when there were only 200,000 people living in Ottawa. So the number of people interested in this royal visit was immense. And of course, the Queen was already familiar to Canadians because she'd visited in 1951 as Princess Elizabeth with Prince Philip, because King George VI was suffering from lung cancer and had been unable to undertake another Canadian royal visit himself. So Princess Elizabeth had represented him and was already quite popular in Canada when she visited as Queen in 1957 to open Parliament. And she would visit again with Prince Philip in 1959 for the last great whistle-stop train tour across Canada, visiting all of the provinces and territories.
And she was there again in 1967, marking Canada's centennial, speaking to Parliament.
100 years of Confederation. What a simple statement, but what a remarkable chapter in Canada's history. It is altogether right and fitting that sovereign and people should meet together here at the heart and center of Canadian existence to give thanks on this great occasion. Canada is a country that has been blessed beyond most other countries in this world.
And then again in 1982, when the old British North America Act was superseded and Canada's dependence on Westminster was finally and completely ended, making it completely independent. Here's the signing of that ceremony between the Queen and the then Canadian Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau.
The moment the Queen puts her signature on this document, it becomes law. It will be witnessed later. The Constitution is now home. Fanfare in the background, as you can
hear. It does strike me, I don't know whether you'd agree, that there's, more warmth towards the monarchy in Canada than there is, for example, in Australia or even New Zealand, equivalent dominions. Why is that?
Well, certainly our Constitution is structured in a way that for there to be a change in the system of government, all 10 provinces would have to agree, and all 10 provinces very rarely agree on anything. And also there's treaties between the Crown and Indigenous peoples, so they would also have to be consulted. Queen Elizabeth II became part of the tapestry of Canadian history. She was there to open the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959, for Canada's centennial in 1967, as we've discussed, where she not only addressed Parliament, but also went to Expo 67 in Montreal and traveled on the monorail there, giving the royal wave to the crowds who were there for the World's Fair. She was there for the patriation of the Constitution. So there's a sense in which the Queen is woven into Canadian history and culture. So unlike Australia in 1999, Canada has never had a referendum about the future of the monarchy. So all of these Commonwealth realms have their own distinctive crowns and their own relationship with the monarchy, even though it is the same monarch in the various Commonwealth realms. These are very distinctive histories.
I mean, I get the impression, I think there was a very successful visit by Prince of Wales and Kate previously, and also Harry and Meghan held the Invictus Games there. It seems to me it's not just the monarch, it's the royal family as a whole that have invested a lot in the relationship with Canada.
Yes, and there are members of the royal family who have become very close to Canada and Canadians over the years. The future King Edward VIII, in 1919, long before his abdication, purchased a ranch in Alberta, and he described himself as a Canadian when he was at his ranch. As you mentioned previously, that Harry and Meghan were there for Invictus Games, and Meghan, of course, had been living in Toronto. Toronto for some years while she was filming the TV series Suits. And there have been members of the royal family who have lived in Government House at Rideau Hall and have been governors general or vice regal consorts, whether it's Queen Victoria's daughter, Princess Louise, whose husband, Lord Lorne, was governor general in 1878, or Queen Victoria's son, Prince Arthur, the Duke of Connaught, during the First World War, or Queen Mary's younger brother, the Earl of Athlone, during the Second World War. And Canada provided a refuge for the Dutch royal family during the Second World War, as well as there's a lot of royalty in Ottawa at that time. So we see a lot of royal connections to Canada over the years. And Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, famously said in 1939 that Canada made us. She felt that that tour in 1939 had given King George VI a great deal of confidence going into the challenges of the Second World War.
Now, obviously, we've got unique circumstances now, a new monarch, King Charles, and we've got Donald Trump laying claims to Canada, or at least saying he'd like to take over Canada. So what are Canadians expecting from the King? It's going to be a very brief visit, I think less than 24 hours, but he is going to deliver a speech. What are Canadians looking for?
Canadians are going to be looking for a ceremony that really showcases Canada's political institutions and history and system of government. The presence of King Charles III in Ottawa giving the speech for the throne, it shows that Canada's system of government is distinct from that of the United States, that we are a constitutional monarchy rather than a presidential republic. There's going to be a lot of interest in the Canadian symbolism. King Charles and Queen Camilla will be escorted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We're going to see the presence of military regiments in Canada, where King Charles is Colonel-in-Chief. And there will be interest, of course, in whether Queen Camilla wears one of her 5 Canadian brooches from the past royal tours of Canada. So there's going to be a lot of interest in all of the symbolism of this visit, and also seeing how King Charles and Queen Camilla interact with ordinary Canadians. There'll be the parade, there'll be an event at Lansdowne Park in Ottawa, so lots of opportunities for people from all walks of life to see the King and Queen, as well as the official ceremonies.
Dr. Karen Harris, thank you very much indeed. And alternative voice, Matt in Ontario, has messaged us saying, I'm a Brit in Canada. I think the mood over the King's visit is more amused apathy than enthusiasm. It's a polite whatever. Well, we shall see.